in regards to what you said just a couple minutes ago, will it change? Well, luckily, that's why this position came about, and that's why we're having this discussion. It will change because when humans are left to their own devices, we see what we do. The change happening right now is a shift in consciousness. And the best way to relate to it is when technology took over. 30, 40 years ago, businesses started to need to implement technology. The very intelligent people within the business didn't understand it, but there were people who did understand websites and coding and URLs. So they hired chief technology officers. The shift on this planet right now is consciousness. It's always been there, but it's becoming more prevalent. Every piece of technology, including AI, everything you, me, and everyone has ever done, physical and non-physical, came from consciousness. So as this shift happens, that is a natural invisible force that's taking the thing that you're talking about. Will it change? It will, because it's going to force people up from second to third grade, elementary to junior. It's going to push subtly the individual to be less conflicted and divided. Will it ever go away? Not in our lifetime, but it will get better. And when it comes to businesses, politics, religions, this position is going to be absolutely crucial, because if the shift is consciousness, you're going to want to have someone on staff who understands that at a very high, clear level so they can navigate it with their employees, with their individuals. Someone like you who's already naturally doing this by respecting all of your employees, respecting all of your managers, and saying, I don't give a shit what you think, what you believe, you're going to respect it. That's a very big deal, right? It is going to shift naturally in a way humanity's never seen before right now. And that shift is going to make it that the same things that employees, executives, politics, religions, how they went about their existence is not going to work in the future. We are truly co-creating a whole new humanity, whole new planet, whole new world. And they're going to want someone who understands that at a very deep level. And most importantly, is neutral.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, oh, we know where Canada is, and British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. And you have that big city called Vancouver, right? And we are 500 miles north, or 800 kilometers north of Vancouver. And Prince George, about 82,000 people. It is a beautiful city. It is exactly in the center of British Columbia, north-south, east to west. Big province, and we have lots of forest all around us, and lots of friends, black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, wolf, foxes, you name it. We have them all. We call it paradise. So our guest today, his name is Charley Johnson, and Charley is a professional journey, includes roles as a business owner, president of the Pay It Forward Foundation, and the student of enlightened teacher. He is also quite involved as a chief consciousness officer for the Front Row Businesses Worldwide. So, Charley, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. Looking forward to it.
So tell us a bit about yourself. You are located in Utah, as I understand it. Tell us about your background. How did you where did you get educated? Where did you originate? And how did you get into, in particular, being a business owner and a student in consciousness in particular?
Born and raised in Utah. As most people know, Utah is very religious, very Mormon. I wasn't, but I also was an atheist. I wasn't Catholic. I wasn't Buddhist. I had a very unique upbringing in where I didn't have a lot of structure in a sense. And for me, that worked. I wasn't a bad kid. That minimization of structure didn't lead me down drugs or alcohol or anything like that. It led me to being open. I was not good around kids my age, though. So I was offered a job when I was 16 within an organization, and I jumped at the chance because I get to be around adults. When I got into that business, I had a natural knack for business because I was okay being ignorant. I was okay asking questions. I was always around the executives, just absorbing. I didn't have certain constructs that just pushed things. I loved it. I took that business over a few years later after the CEO passed away. Again, very young. I blue collar parents, no college education, barely. I didn't like high school because of the kids around. I loved being around adults in business. That business took off. We did quite well with a partner of mine. I flew 2 million miles during my time in that business. And then at the end, I developed a fear of flying. And
So,
it had, go ahead.
one question, Charlie.
Yes.
What kind of business was it? Or
Manufacturing
is it?
products,
Okay.
promotional products. So
Okay.
kind of like your shirt, your hat, everything starts out blank. The
Right.
industry that creates that is the promotional products.
Okay.
So manufacturing company. I flew 2 million miles during my time there, developed a fear of flying. It had nothing to do with that fear. As soon as I finally was pushed out of the business on my own, because I just couldn't do it anymore, I was on a plane to Europe a month later. So the universe literally needed me out of that comfort. It was so we were the culture was incredible. 260 employees, everyone got along. We never lost people. Safety, security, something I didn't have as a kid. It was everything I could ever dream of until the universe stepped in. So since that didn't work, like you said, the Pay It Forward Foundation, the book and the movie, I thought I would go egoically save the world through random acts of kindness. It was fun. It was incredible. Tens of millions of people, 130 countries got involved. During that time is when I met my teacher. I'm looking at the books in the background. You're a big guy on self development. Most of us are. Most of us get involved in some way of bettering ourselves. I did that as well, but they couldn't help me. I was asking deeper questions and they kept telling me it wasn't right. So I kind of felt like weird. Like you're helping all my friends, you're helping hundreds of people, everyone's talking about you. Why the hell can't you help me? Luckily, one of the coaches finally said, "You have deeper questions than I can handle. You need a teacher." I was like, what is a teacher? Like, what do you mean by that?
Right.
Again, the universe stepped in, had me cross paths with an 85-year-old man by the name of Dick Birch. He made a couple comments to me completely randomly. He was ass naked in the sauna. It was really uncomfortable for me, but he said some things that really triggered. I started asking him questions. He started having me read books. He had me learn meditation. He led to one guy, which then led to my 10 years with a very high level teacher. And the reason I bring up my background in Utah, not having constructs or religion, is when I met him, he didn't have to strip anything away. So I was learning very high level stuff, consciousness, the universe, how humans work, the mind, and I was just absorbing it. I didn't have any ignorance to worry about. I didn't have any bias to worry about. I was just learning very purely how we function as human beings. That led to this. He had me read hundreds of books, not to fill my mind full of knowledge, but to show me on my own that all religions, all political divide, all conflict, all division, all businesses, all knowledge comes from the same source. So that led me to how can such intelligent people be at such odds with each other politically, religiously, and in so many other different ways in the world? It made no sense to me.
So, where did the fella that you met and became influential in your life in terms of understanding or trying to understand and starting to interact with you that made things click for you? Where did he get his experience? And he was an old guy already, 85.
Well, he grew up in Utah. He was the typical Utahn. He was the typical Mormon.
Right.
but he had a curiosity. So he went off on his own earlier in his life. He couldn't talk about it to his family. He couldn't talk about it to his wife. He couldn't even talk about it to the guys he played handball with. When he met me, he's like, holy shit, there's finally this guy that's going to listen to me and not be ignorant. Like, he loved talking, and I loved listening to him. He was the one that broke open the dam. He was the one that had me read different books, but he was the one that, and he's still around. I just went to lunch with him a couple days ago. He's 95 or something, but he was the one that led me to the 10 years with the teacher. Because his name's Dick Birch. He wasn't my teacher. He was the catalyst. The teacher guy, massively intelligent, decades with a very enlightened teacher himself. He can do certain things that defy the laws of physics. That's all I can say. And there's a
Right.
lot of people on this planet that can do that.
Right.
We think certain things are magical and mystical. They're just consciousness. We can
Right.
do certain things that people just, and we're starting to learn that more with the way science is starting to come out. But um, they were very influential on me in the fact that they helped me understand both sides of any argument. And what they did is they created an incredibly unbiased, neutral individual, which then can be a chief consciousness officer within an organization to help minimize the division and conflict.
If you hear interaction between individuals of different opinions, and then in order to understand the interaction or be part of it in some form, you have to acquire the skill of being a good listener. I call it a
Yeah.
skill because I'm
Oh,
doing a book,
100%.
as you can see over my shoulder. It's coming out in in July. It's pretty much done. It's about communications skills. And one of the most important part of being a good, at least in my mind, an effective communicator, you must be a good listener.
100%. Let me add to that. You're right. When I add to these things and I say what I say, I'm not disagreeing with anything. I don't have a dog in the fight. There's a lot of people that would say that same thing that you just said, and they would be right. My question is just a one layer deep. How does the world look? We have had 20 years of wellness programs. We have had more books on happiness than we've ever had. We have more information and knowledge on how to be a better human, how to be a better listener, how to be a better communicator. And we're doing it. But as we listen and we're democratic and the person talking to us is Republican, I don't give a shit what you say. Whether they admit it or not, consciously or subconsciously understand it, they have walled off listening to that individual because they believe that part of the political party is ruining the world, and vice versa. A Catholic could come up with a cure for cancer. An atheist is going to say, nope, Now, I know this sounds incredibly childish. I know this, people listening at an individual level would say, I'm not that way. All we have to do is look at the group level and simply look at the world. Just like wellness programs within companies, 20 years of meditation, mindfulness, people really being aware, cramming awareness programs down people, forcing people to do things to better their profitability, to be more retention, less burnout, less stress. We can argue whether they're working or not. My question is, how does the world look? How does business look? It's more divided and conflicted than ever. So obviously, it's not about working or not working. Something's missing. So when you talk about communication and listening, I'm assuming because of your success and who you are, you're a very good communicator. You're a very good listener. No problem there. But because we chose a side, there is a subtle energy on this planet that people can feel. And we always, when we're pushed, if someone pushes us on our political view, we're coming out swinging. And we're going to choose a side. And we're going to say, we're right and you're wrong. And they're going to say, we're right, you're wrong. We've done that since the beginning of humanity. How does it look like it's working? It's not. And it's getting worse. And again, back to my original point, we've never had access to more information on how not to be divided, how to find happiness, how to be better, how to have life hacks. It's not working because we're talking about leaves of a tree. No one's getting to the root of the issue. It's consciousness. This thing right here is merely the middleman. This creates division and conflict. This is what creates the problems. This is the same mind that created it that can't solve it. We got to get to the source. Once we get to the source, it removes a little bit of division and conflict. We will be more open in our listening and our communication. When you're that divided and conflicted, you're here. It doesn't matter if you're Harvard grad, if you got a 170 IQ, if you think you're the kindest person in the world. If you're here, the only thing you're seeing is what comes in this purview. And if it's Republican, all you see is Republican. And anything that Democrat leaks in, you don't like it. Catholic, right? All this position does, all this discussion does, is this. My answers and what I look to in this world and how I see it is very limited. Someone does this, it opens up. Less division, less conflict. I'm a better listener. I'm a better communicator. I have more empathy for the other side. Oh, maybe he is right. Maybe the other side thinks I'm just as crazy as they are. I wonder what that means rather than screw you, I'm right, they're wrong. Well, the screw you, I'm right, you're wrong has created more wars, more conflict, more division, and more pain and suffering in this world, to which every parent says, I want to leave the world better for my kid. Well, you're creating the same conflict and division that you want to rid the world of and that you think the other side's ruining. We have to pay attention to that. And someone has to bring that awareness to the world, but what better place than in business? So instead of being super spiritual and it's all one and we meditate and it's all love and it's going to fix everything, that doesn't work either. Bring that into business, bridge the gap between those two worlds, and you will see a change in humanity you've never seen before, ever.
I like it. So, just a little bit about me is that I was born in 1940, so I'm 84 and a half years young. And so I was born in northeastern Holland, as
I
I
saw that part of
indicated.
your story.
And
That's amazing.
so I saw too much of the war and
Mm-hmm.
and subsequently, have resulting in, even at 5 years old, PTSD and the inner child issues. And then April is special to me, April this year in particular, because I was then 5 years old in 1945 when we got liberated by the Canadian Army. It made such an impression on me that I knew from that point forward that as I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. I was going to go when I
Beautiful.
was 17, and my parents said, no, you're too young. So then, I went when I was 25, 24 actually, and I wanted to start with nothing. So I took one suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and had very little money. Academically, I was not a success story in Holland. I failed grade 3. I failed grade 7 3 times. And so, and I kind of felt that who am I was always a question I could not reconcile in my mind. I was different than the others, and I did not know why. People call me everything. Kids are hard on each other. After I failed grade 7 3 times, my friends that used to be with me, and I was part of the group, went to college and university, and I became a laborer at 12 and a half years old. I got a job in a furniture factory. A fellow that owned it was a friend of my dad, and that's where I started working with my hands, because they said, well, obviously he will not my parents were beautiful people, but he will never really become successful, and he's just not smart enough, and blah, 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 and all of that kind of stuff. And so I knew that was not so. I felt I was just as smart as any of the others, but I felt I
Hmm.
had to start over again. So when I was 24, decided to go to Canada. That was my dream. The other dream was to build a lumber mill. That was my lumber mill, and that meant I had to go to British Columbia. That's where all the trees are. So when I
Yep.
arrived in Montreal, took the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights, I said, "Oh my God, that's a long way." So in any event, I landed. I arrived in Vancouver, went through the immigration department, and couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job. Fortunately, there was a German fellow. I could speak a little bit of German. So I told him what I wanted to do. He said, "Go to Prince George, 500 miles north. That's where the trees are. That's where businesses are, sawmills, blah, blah, blah." And I arrived here in Prince
The
George.
number. Yep. 25,
Exactly.
47. Yep.
Exactly. And I had my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money at least 3 times. And you got this 2547. That's what I
Yep.
had. And no
Yep.
job, didn't know a soul. But I knew I was going to start from nothing. I started as a cleaner man, lumber piler, and within a year and a half, I was the superintendent of one of the larger mills here. And then that didn't go fast enough for me. So then I got involved in owning part of a mill, or the option to have part of a mill, a smaller sawmill with a couple of other partners. And so where was it, John? Well, it was in the Yukon Territory. And for those people watching us from around the world, the Yukon is north of British Columbia, about 1,000 miles north of Vancouver, right next to Alaska. And so people ask me, "So what is the weather like in Holland?" I say the difference between winter and summer in Holland is the rain is colder in the wintertime. That was Holland. In Watson Lake, I have seen snow in July. I've seen 62 below. And Watson Lake is a lake, and in June, July, if you're lucky, you can water ski on it. It's the best place to water ski because you can't fall off. If you do, you die instantly. That's how cold it is, more or less. So anyway, so that was Watson Lake. I was there for 5 years, and then again came back to Prince George, started my initial company. It's not about how successful John is, but simply is saying that I started. The other part that is important about this is not 2547, but I am attitude. I always have been positive. I still now, if you have negative, don't even come close to me. I have a passion for whatever I do. I give it 125%. Work ethic. I work harder than anybody. I still get up, even now at nearly 85. I get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so that's what I do. And I love the
Beautiful.
world. I love every single day. I fly around a lot. We do a lot of business in the United States as well. If I fly, I'm also, interesting that you said you're afraid of flying, but I'm also a pilot. I was in the Air Force in Holland for a little over 2 years. So I'm familiar with planes. I fly myself, but I do also commercial flights into the United States and Canada. And I look out the window because I love the American landscape, and I have done business with them for the last 50, 60 years, and they were part of liberating us as part of the Allied forces that landed in Normandy in June of 1944, and then as they pushed their way to freedom in Europe, Canadians went north, the Americans went other places together with the Britons. And then in 1947, when Holland and lots of Europe was devastated, they helped through the Marshall Plan rebuild Europe, and it resulted into where we are today, and all the opportunities of the free world. And I still admire the Americans in particular. They are the example of democratic rule in the world. And in particular, as it says in their constitution, we the people is the foundation of democratic rule in the United States, although sometimes it gets challenged a bit, but the democratic rule and the Constitution at the end will be an example to the rest of the world as we go through the ups and downs. So
Yes.
that to me was important. The other part I was just going to mention is that I'm not religious. I'm agnostic. I have
Hmm.
no idea what goes on there. I respect everybody. And the challenge that I have is I've seen war, I've seen devastation, I watch it now around the world, and the most of the wars and most of the devastation in the world, the foundation in a lot of cases is religions of different
Hmm.
sorts. It's
Yes.
simply because, as you say, no matter what you say, because you politically, Canada is very, very boring compared to what we see south of the border. We have an election
Yes.
coming up on the 28th of April. Nobody worries about it. They go do their choices, and you have the Conservatives, you have the Liberals, you have the furthest wing of the left side and the right side, and likely one of the two parties will win, either the Republicans or the Conservatives, or and so that will be it. And on the 29th, we know what it is, and then we go on. So
Yep.
and so it's boring by comparison, which right now probably is a good thing. So
That is a very good thing.
but
Yes.
at the same time, Charlie, what I say, I love Canada. I love North America. I love being here as part of a North American one. A lot of my friends are in the United States. For all intents and purposes, I go now to Europe. There are no borders, really. We go straight from Holland into Germany. We don't even stop. We go right into it. To a certain extent, although now we have a few challenges, but the same has been the interaction between the Americans and the Canadians. We have resources that we interact with the Americans about, and we have a lot of interaction, which I believe is a good thing. And so
Yes.
it makes us very fortunate, and obviously, we will always have people that have differences of opinion, and and so I was fortunate, and a lot of people say you went through a lot, hunger, and all of those other things, but it gave me a foundation of appreciating what follows. And so
Hmm.
now, to me, money is not important, although I have different companies and all the other kind of things. What I like is interacting. One of the best things for me has been I love podcasting with the world, an immensely powerful platforms that
Yes.
where we can interact. I talk with you about issues or interact with you about ideas. And I know already that you're my podcast number 403, where I'm hosting. I've done about 250 where I'm guesting. And we have podcasts around the world. And so
Yes.
one day Australia, maybe in Central Europe, God only knows where. And then at the same time, we know that, and again, not bragging, but speaking about the importance of it. So we're approaching 1 million subscribers on YouTube. That means that up to 2 million people can watch our podcast. It's amazing. And it's only at the beginning. And hopefully that brings forward people like yourself, like myself, that are distinctly maybe different in areas. And the people that are watching may say, I like this, so I'm going to share it with others. I'm not selling anything other than
Yep.
saying, this is important to me, and this has changed my life in many ways. What happened to me as a kid, what happened to me all the way around. and then at the same time interacting with people like Charley Johnson about consciousness and things that changed his life when he met the fellow in the that 85-year-old fella that kind
Mm-hmm.
of gave him different ideas and directed him to a teacher. But looking
Yep.
all the way around, the interesting about my life is that I'm married to my wife Sharon, been together for over 40 years, 42 years or so, I think. And so her dad passed away. He was a Mormon. And her mom, she was a Mennonite. And I
Okay.
was always, I had very good relationship with them. And as religions have always been interesting to me because even in Holland, Holland is interesting is that, and I don't know if you've been there, but if you have, Holland is not very big. It's basically a delta, and there are rivers flowing through, the main rivers flow
Mm-hmm.
through Holland. And if you look at Holland, Holland, very liberal, but also very religious. I was not part of that, but in the northern part of Holland, mainly Protestant oriented. In the south of Holland, mainly Catholic. And saying that if you look back in time, Holland had been dominated by different forces, Spain, France, Morocco, all the other ones were there, that had an influence. And the Catholic influence came from south of Holland. See, how come the north then is Protestant oriented and the south is Catholic? Very simple reason. The main rivers that flow to Holland, you couldn't get across them.
Hmm.
And so that is the main reason that the influence is mainly Catholic in the south and Protestant in the north. But even when I grew up already, if in a little town that we lived in and where we were born, if there was another family, Catholic family moving into town, then, or there were several of them and there were all kinds of different churches, they didn't say the Catholics are taking over.
Mm-hmm.
That type, or with the Protestant, there were different levels of that again that disagreed on one paragraph or one sentence. And so they say, well, they then built their own church. And so, and more or less, how can it be? Why do we do this? And why is it based on, as you were saying, is that if you're a Democrat or a Republican, then no matter what you say, I must disagree with you because that is not, something along those lines. And
Yep.
uh, will it change? I don't think so. It has been part of it likely. Will we become more tolerant? Hopefully. And can we interact like you and me can do and respect each other for either what we do or what we don't do, then that's an inspiration, at least for some that say, okay, you know, I'm not preoccupied about what is your politics or what is your religion, or I believe try to be, at least in my world, try to be, a, if I feel I've been successful, then I would say I was a good person, you know. And what does that mean? It doesn't go over and beyond, but I would try to have respect. And usually what I do in my companies when, we employ several hundred of people, employees, and I always say to my supervisors, we will respect people. I don't care if they work for us for 5 minutes or 50 years or 40 years or whatever it is, so we will always start with respect, not only as it applies to employees, but right across the board. That to me is important. It's simplifying things maybe or being too simple about it, but I like to go out and I like to look around and behind me and fly around and saying, I'm in paradise.
Beautiful.
And and we are collectively in North America, in my mind.
Yes. In regards to what you said just a couple minutes ago, will it change? Well, luckily, that's why this position came about, and that's why we're having this discussion. It will change because when humans are left to their own devices, we see what we do. The change happening right now is a shift in consciousness. And the best way to relate to it is when technology took over. 30, 40 years ago, businesses started to need to implement technology. The very intelligent people within the business didn't understand it, but there were people who did understand websites and coding and URLs. So they hired chief technology officers. The shift on this planet right now is consciousness. It's always been there, but it's becoming more prevalent. Every piece of technology, including AI, everything you, me, and everyone has ever done, physical and non physical, came from consciousness. So as this shift happens, that is a natural invisible force that's taking the thing that you're talking about. Will it change? It will, because it's going to force people up from second to third grade, elementary to junior. It's going to push subtly the individual to be less conflicted and divided. Will it ever go away? Not in our lifetime, but it will get better. And when it comes to businesses, politics, religions, this position is going to be absolutely crucial, because if the shift is consciousness, you're going to want to have someone on staff who understands that at a very high, clear level so they can navigate it with their employees, with their individuals. Someone like you who's already naturally doing this by respecting all of your employees, respecting all of your managers, and saying, I don't give a shit what you think, what you believe, you're going to respect it. That's a very big deal, right? It is going to shift naturally in a way humanity's never seen before right now. And that shift is going to make it that the same things that employees, executives, politics, religions, how they went about their existence is not going to work in the future. We are truly co-creating a whole new humanity, whole new planet, whole new world. And they're going to want someone who understands that at a very deep level. And most importantly, is neutral.
Access to information critical to this, in particular the fear that people now have about AI. AI will play an absolutely major role in accomplishing what you are suggesting. All the information is available to virtually everybody as we go around the world, because that part will change more so than computers, more so than anything before. It will bring people closer together, and hopefully, in question, the health differences to bring, because we are only strong and content when we can bring things together.
Yes. And artificial intelligence, that is a construct we put on it. There's nothing artificial about it.
No.
We created it. That is as natural as any part of consciousness as everything else. If we, just like everything else on this planet, there's people who are for it. There's people who are incredibly against it. So just like everything else, it's causing division. If we look at it from a different understanding of, it's not artificial, it's not about being right or wrong, understanding where it came from our consciousness, it came from us. If that's the case, we have access to that same amount of information. If we go here, if someone helps us understand what consciousness is, that we can tap into it, that we are it, that we have access to it, we don't need artificial intelligence. We can still keep the human side of being humanity and use, if we get lazy and we want some answers quick, we can still use artificial intelligence. But we've got to shift how we view these things, because everything we create creates division.
Yeah.
If we shift it, we understand where it comes from, the source, not the mind, changes everything.
Yeah. And artificial intelligence, I should not say simply, but basically what it does, it makes access to information much easier to access. So, and it's being used now, and the people that are opposed to it, the genie is out of the bottle. So from here on in, it will not go back. That will become a major, major part of who we are and what we do and how we interact with others. It becomes part of that foundation, far
Yes.
even beyond the influence of computers and all of those kind of things that you referred to earlier, that this will be at the equal, if not more so, even in bringing people together from around the world. And it is amazing. Can you imagine that, like not all the long ago in my lifetime, when I came to Canada in 1965, I would send telexes to my family saying, I'm okay. Stop. Got a new job. Stop. I'm making $2 an hour, and send me some money or do this or that, and then I send that, and then a couple of days later I get back. I can see it here now. I push my button on my iPhone, and I'm not only speaking to them, I see them, I interact with them. Then
Hmm.
I can go one step further, push another button, and I can interact with somebody in Spain, although I don't speak Spanish. And if they don't, be on the fly translated into the all of those things are happening, and it brings us closer together. And so it is. I can see where there is some anxiety about it in a lot of people. That I'm not suggesting that I understand it, but I appreciate it in terms of what it will do, at least in my opinion, that it will change the world, no question about it. Status quo will not be the same again
Yep.
in regards to those things, and I think that's a good thing.
It is. It is a very good thing. And on top of that, I'm hoping that conversations, people like you who allow us to have this conversation to get out, I hope we can take it one step deeper. Meaning, we have never had, as you put it, and I would agree, never had access to more information. We've never had more access to more books on life hacks, how to be better, how to live better. We've never had more books written about how to be happy. We have access to be the best we've ever been. We have a world that's still incredibly divided and conflicted. So we've got to we all say the same thing. We talk about how much we have access to. We're 100% correct. But as we read that information that we've never had access to, which again, I agree with what you're saying, if we keep filtering that information through a Republican mind or a Democratic mind or a Catholic mind or a Muslim mind or an atheist mind, that has always been the issue. So we can give access to 8 billion people of all the information like we are now, like you said, have access to our iPhone. We all have that. My question is one step deeper. The world's never been more divided and conflicted. So, could we just simply be more aware that as we read this information, as we become educated, as we have a 170 IQ and think we're the smartest things on the planet, could we understand and be aware of our bias and conditioning, that we are filtering it through a mind that believes that I'm right and the other side is wrong? And it's been like that for since the beginning of humanity. Could we just shift that and luckily take advantage of consciousness raising, because humanity's never been through this? So it's not an either or, it's both. We have access to the information, we have access how to be happy, we have access to be a better person, to be a better person, and to be kind and everything. Just one step, just one step further. Could we understand consciousness and that the conditioning of our bias mind, and every time we choose a side, politically, religiously, or anything, we are minimizing our ability to take that information and give it to the world without creating division and conflict. Again, this is a conversation that's not happening. We're not talking about levels of consciousness. We're not talking about being neutral. So, again, I'm very appreciative of you, especially with your audience and your abilities to get this out to the world, to at least put this in the awareness, because now they can't unhear what you and I are talking about. It's been planted. The, the best gardener in the universe is the universe, and it'll water. But we do have access to this. We are kind people. We all love certain things. But we got to remember the conditioning is that we're filtering it through a mind that if we're pushed into a corner, we're coming out swinging. Could we get to the point where we're a little bit more neutral, where we truly can be to each their own? We could agree to disagree without going to war, without believing we're right, you're wrong. Like, that's a very difficult thing, but it's a conversation that has to be had, has to be brought into the awareness. And again, I'm very appreciative of people like you allowing it to happen.
I like that, Charlie. Is that in a way I look at it in my own, experience from the time that I was young and during the war years. Being a challenge for me was academically, the was bound to fail, but the gift that I have had, although it took me a long time to reconcile who am I, and so it was not, and you may find this interesting, that I never quite understood, and so certain things happen as it did for you when you met the fella, the 85-year-old fella, as you indicated, and I thought it was comical. I was going to save it a little bit and say, "Oh, I'm 85 too." You probably knew that already, but so I thought it was kind of comical. So that I knew there was something, but I always have been an optimist and a positive one, and saying that, rather than some people, a lot of people are negative. They are like to be negative about things. I don't do that. I like to be positive. I always say, okay, let's look at the other side wherever I can. Not based on religion, not based on politics, but trying to be just, how fortunate are we? And I look at, that I know what war is because I lived it. And for a lot of people, they respectfully may think that once you have war, the war is over and everything goes back to normal. No, it doesn't.
No.
It may take generations after that. I look at
Yes.
our situation where, my mom and dad were married in 1938, and they were in love. And my dad had a job, and they rented this beautiful house very quickly, had 2 children. And then my mother was pregnant with me in 1940, and my dad was called into the Dutch army. And because there was a danger of the Germans invading Holland. And so for 5 years, they wouldn't know if he was alive or dead. The last time they saw him, just before the Germans, that didn't think the capitulation was quick enough, bombed the center of Rotterdam, and thousands of people died. And so that when after 5 years he came back, I didn't know who the guy was, because I never met him. And even at 5, I already, that I always appreciate how much kids know. I've seen it in my grandchildren from 3 to 5 years old. Those are the formative years that will stay with them. And so, so it always kind of stayed with me in terms of, that part being part of me and appreciating all the things that we have here. If I fly around or I drive around, I look out at the window all around me, it's paradise. How lucky we are. And then keep in mind the Middle East, keep in mind the Eastern Europe and China, Venezuela, Cuba, and I can go on and on and on, is that democratic rule has been fortunate to us. And so that brings me back to this other one, is saying that, who am I? So what happened to me is that I failing all the grade 3 and grade 7. And so I walked into a store here in Prince George. And I already was here for, that was 1997. I already was here for 32 years. And everybody said, "Oh, you're so successful," and blah, 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 and all of that kind of stuff. I didn't feel that way. I feel I had failed. And so I walked into a store here, and I picked up a book. I don't know why I did. And the book's title was Driven to Distraction by Dr. Halliwell. And as I looked at the book, it was about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, this is me. And I wrote in the book, this is the actual book, and I wrote in the book right here, January 1997, and I wrote it in Dutch because I was ashamed of it because it implied it was a mental deficiency of some sort. And I wrote there, now I finally know who I am. And so now Dr. Halliwell, medical doctor, has written 18 books, 5 of them on distraction. He is ADHD and has dyslexia. So do I. And so, so that changed my life as to who am I? And so that became part of my life. And actually, interestingly enough, for the people watching us, is that you're my podcast number 403. My podcast 203 is with Dr. Halliwell. Can you believe it? He wrote his book in 1993. I bought it in 1997, and it changed my life in regards to this. And so, and then it changed my life, but I also wrote a book about it after that. So when I had this, 1997, it took me 5 years before I would go to my doc that delivered our 2 daughters and was a personal friend. And he said, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And so we checked it out, and I do. So the more I found out about it, the more I called it a superpower. And I believe it is. And even when I talked to Dr. Halliwell, I believed initially, I thought maybe 8% of the population, women portray it differently than males, usually. And I thought maybe 8, but then I realized that it was much higher than that. And during my conversation with Dr. Halliwell, I said it's probably around 20%, but he's the expert, I lived it. And he said, no, John, it's probably more than 25%. And I agreed with him. Somebody that wants to see the podcast is podcast number 203, On the Brink, with Dr. Halliwell. The other part that he said was interesting, and I've got to know a lot of people that are very successful entrepreneurs or in business and business leaders that I interacted with. And I suggested to Dr. Halliwell that I believe that of the successful business people, and the operative is successful business people, probably 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, probably 75%.
Yeah, it's higher.
I agree with him. So that kind of changed my life. And that was I already was then 62 years old when I got diagnosed. So can you imagine that I left school, grade 7, failing 3 times. At 12 and a half years old, I became a laborer. And so I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down on. But I was still searching for, I knew I was just as smart as the others, not smarter then, but who am I? And so the other part was that I didn't have the self-confidence that even not when I was successful in business until 1990, when an ex-sister-in-law of mine said to me, and I could interact with people in my company, maybe it's 3, 4 people around me, but not beyond that, I was not good. He said, I want you to go with me to Toastmasters. I said, what's that all about? He said, well, it's about developing communication skills. And I said, okay, are you going to ask me any questions? Because if they are, I'm not going there. He said, no, you just sit there. Well, halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about who you are. And I said, oh my God, I'll never go back here. So, but I did. And in the first meetings, I could have crawled out of there, but I didn't. I stayed for 10 years, became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is the highest level in Toastmasters, and it changed my life together with this book. And so for 50 years, between the age of 12 and a half and 62 years old, I was wondering, who am I? Why can I not do what the others do? Is failing classes, and it's always the same. In Holland, they had the numbering system that they had from 0 to 10 if you did a test of some sort, and 0 was the lowest and 10 was the best. And then as they read them all off all throughout the class, and they said, and John Brink, same as always, 0. Yeah. So in any event, so I got beyond. And so, but for 50 years, it had in a way, an adverse effect on me until I saw that. Then after that, I started writing books. The first one that I wrote was Against All Odds. And a lot of people said to me, oh, you had such an interesting life. You have to write a book about it. I said, well, writing books is not easy. And so I started until about 6-7 years ago, already well into my 70s. And I said, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. So this book took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And then from there on in, I wrote, I'm now working on my 5th and my 6th book. And one of them is over my shoulders here. $1 billion communication skills is about, not so much about how to make $1 billion, but how important it is that if these billionaires that are people that were so successful, what lays on the foundation of their success a lot of times? Communication skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt I wanted to write a book about it. That one will be out in July. And then the other ones that I did, another one that you may want to like is the 4th one that I did, is that is nothing more important than health and fitness. And so physically, but also mentally, is that, I got a scare. I had a case of diverticulitis that nearly killed me. It came that close. And so I figured I have to kind of clean up on my wife was vegetarian, still is. And so I didn't listen quite as well as I could have, but I started to listen closer, started to look at my diet. At the same time, I was just like everybody else. At the end of the year, you're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and then you're going to go to the gym, buy a gym membership, and 2 weeks later, you can find 100 reasons why you're too busy to go to the gym. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those. And then I said, no, I can't do that. I hired a trainer, which I did. And after I did training since 1979, for about 5 years, 6 years, somebody said, hey, John, ever thought about competing? I said, me? Yeah. I said, oh my God, because by then, I'm already approaching my 70. But I did. And so this is me now. And so I competed bodybuilding and physique. First in Northern British Columbia, came in second bodybuilding, third in physique, qualified me for the provincials, same there, and then qualified me for the nationals and the Arnolds. Then COVID came, and now I'm training again to go next year to the Arnolds. And and right after this podcast, I'm going to the gym because I do that now all the time, and I look like this at 80, nearly 85.
Beautiful.
And so what I'm saying is that everything is possible, and there is nothing more important than not age or the number, but quality of life is important. And so especially the last decade in a lot of people's life, they take handful of medical things which are, in a lot of cases, not good for you. And so, between diet, exercise, mental health, the combination of all the above, including the issues that we are talking about in terms of awareness, self-consciousness, and all those things are critically important. And
Yes.
quality of life are important. Not to get caught in one particular mindset. There's no issues. Either you agree with what I do, or otherwise there is no issue. We can argue, but we will never agree. Is saying start with respect and how fortunate we are living in North America and watching the world in so many other places where the devastation is can hardly be imagined by anybody
Mm.
what people go through.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, someone like you can imagine it with everything you grew up with. Yeah. It's interesting. Everything, when we have these discussions and we're asking for a deeper lever and we're talking about consciousness, it doesn't take away from anything of what you spoke about. It doesn't matter the story, doesn't matter the experience, it doesn't matter what their awareness points to, it doesn't matter what is important to them. You just went off on 15 minutes of a perfectly crystal clear understanding of, if anyone met you and they heard that, they'd know exactly who you are, what you stand for, what you care about, what you want, what you know. Talking about what we're talking about, consciousness, minimizing the division and conflict, does not take a single cell out of that individual's body about being right or wrong. Everyone can still do what they want. All we're bringing attention to is the division and conflict that we want to rid the world of, that we want to leave this planet better for our kids in the next generation. We are all a part of creating that, of which we don't want, because of how we choose sides. Lifting, being healthy, that's just a more of a way. There's nothing that anyone needs to change inside their existence other than being aware that they are a part of what they want to make the world better and rid the world of. That's it.
That's it.
Tell me your story. Tell me what you like, what you don't like. None of that minimizes or mitigates or needs to be removed from your existence or your life. You don't have to work out. You could think
No,
it's the biggest waste of time. You could be the polar opposite of you. I don't care.
exactly. No,
But let's be aware of
it's
why the
not all
world
fun.
is the way the world is. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful thing. Just we're just going one level deeper and saying why.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
So, in what I get, even with people that are close to me in a lot of cases, I'm always an optimist. And if we get into a difficult situation, I said, how fortunate we are. We are in paradise, not only by location here. If I were in Holland, I would create something around me that I would suggest to me is paradise. And it means
Yes.
that I will respect other people's view. But don't waste time trying to convince me of something that puts me in one direction or the other. I just want to make sure that every day to me is a special day, especially the ones around me that are so special to me. And then, respect everybody, and self consciousness is very important.
Amen. I very much appreciate you allowing me to be on this and spread this word and to listen to your story and everything else. It's been incredible. I really appreciate it.
Charlie, it was a privilege and a pleasure. And for all those people watching us, if you like what we do, you want to do more of it, have you got a contact at all, Charlie, that we can leave for people watching us?
Yes, I'll send it to you if you don't have it yet. It's the LinkedIn. I don't want to go
Okay.
to have someone be lost on a website. I want them
No,
on LinkedIn because I post continuously of what this is, what it's not, and they can better understand how it can implement their business, how it can implement with the individual. So I'll send you my LinkedIn.
excellent. Charlie, thank you. It was a privilege. Let's make sure
No,
we stay
thank
in
you.
touch.
Please. Thank you so much, man.